So there's just been a little patch of, an older, I don't know what this might be, an apple or something, but this is an older cedar right here. And it's just probably 50, 100 feet away from the cemetery. And it continues on this, high ridge here before we kind of start dropping down over there. And I suppose there's another little ridge up top there. But I've been eyeing this for, each time I come here, I say, I got to go check out what's going on over here. And, you come over here, and I told my daughter, I was like, going to be looking for rocks. Sure enough, walk in here, and as you can see, there's definitely some suspicious rocks strewn about. Now, whether this could just be tossed over here because there's trees and they're plowing in the field and they just toss it in here. I mean, it does kind of look a depression in here right along that tree base. It's, there's no way of knowing unless we found an inscribed stone over here. But, right there too is the depression. Could just be old trees that have, rotted, fallen. But it's worth noting, we know that this Jones family was very prominent. They had slaves. One would expect that there was a slave cemetery somewhere. There's a lot of, I guess you could say a pet peeve of ours, but there's a lot of just misinformation floating around that, if you find a field stone, that's a slave cemetery. And, my suspicion is that the vast, 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 vast majority of these fieldstone, tomb rock, only or predominantly cemeteries are actually non-slave cemeteries, but, the incidence of marble markers, especially pushing into the late 1800s, towards the mid 1800s, is extremely, it's uncommon. Which is interesting because you start going out west to Missouri, Indiana in the 1860s and 70s, and there appears to be, let's not step in that way, okay? There appears to be kind of pretty consistent marking. So I don't know if that was a cultural thing, if the cost was just still high here, if they were not, qualified stonemasons, but it's just fairly common to find cemeteries that, and even this one, for example, is a great one to kind of study, in that Edward Jones and Sophia, his wife, they both died in 1854. And those markers that they have there, those diamond sockets, those are at the earliest 1880s, 90s, and probably about turn of the century. And, when I lifted up those markers, you found their original fieldstone headstones that were still kind of laid or laid under there, or alongside of where these later markers were placed. So, I mean, these are prominent folks, and they weren't marked contemporaneously. Interestingly, they have a grandson who was in 1860s with that small marker there, and then the markers begin to become more common as you get into the 1880s and 90s, turn of the century, where it appears that all walks of life started to be able to mark their kin with markers. So it's kind of a pet peeve that we see that for us, that, people will say, oh, I say cemetery over here, and it's more than likely not. One thing we're kind of trying to get a better feel for is what do we know actually is a slave cemetery? And when we know something is a slave cemetery, how does it relate to the cemetery that corresponded with the big house? And, this is interesting finding these here. This could be, and the other thing too is it just doesn't necessarily mean it's slaves. This could be, post-Civil War, tenant farmers, which may have been black or white. So it's just interesting. Like I said, we kind of sitting on this hump here, as you can see, and there's the big cemetery, and we're probably not but 50 to 100 feet from it, and it's awful suspicious. that this patch of trees has been left here, because we know that fence wasn't put but in the 70s. So that cemetery would have been open to the field all the same, and it too has, you know, a big cedar and some other walnuts, which is exactly what's sitting in this one. So I mean, it would just kind of peculiar that this was allowed to remain kind of grown up in the midst of a, you know, field here, and so yeah, I mean, we'll like I said, we'll more than likely never know. You know, these things have extreme disturbances. There's a lot of cattle running through here, which thankfully have been excluded from that cemetery. But for this one, I mean, you walk over here, you see this just looks like a row of depression right here. Could just be a tree, could be nothing. But what I do know is we walked over here. You see there's a rock there. I walked over here suspicious, and sure enough, we found rocks. Meanwhile, earlier I was looking for rocks and couldn't find a rock when I needed to use it as a shim. So, wouldn't surprise me if this is a cemetery. This is a burial ground here for slaves. As I said, they owned some slaves. I don't think it was a tremendous number, but enough where one would expect to have found and had a need for a burial ground. We're not talking 1 or 2. We're talking probably in the range of 10 to 20. And I mean, we knew that they lived here. They owned land here, the Jones family, from about 1804, 06, all the way to, I mean, the Jones family itself didn't lose this until the 70s, 1970s. So you're looking at almost 175 years in that one family. But I mean, at least about 60 years of slavery. So, plus whatever post-slavery residency and labor continued. So it's interesting. I want to, you know, kind of share some thoughts, and you know, it certainly could be nothing here, but you know, it is peculiar that this would have been left here. I mean, frankly, it's peculiar that it's even been left here through today, because it doesn't take much to push over these 4 trees here and end it. So it makes me think that someone knew or knows that this is a burial spot and didn't want to disturb it. You know, we've been doing a lot of research lately into cemeteries that were in fact destroyed. Specifically one just down the road from here, who is a cemetery of the father and grandfather of some of the folks in here that we know was more likely than not destroyed in the 1960s. And it's interesting, the description that was given, because I suspect it was heavily tomb rocks, was that it was a slave cemetery, and that probably played a role in the decision and willingness to just destroy it. It's kind of a nameless, faceless plot that is a little bit easier to rationalize. I mean, I have trouble. I would never be able to do that, but I suppose when you dehumanize the folks who are buried there, it becomes easier to justify destruction. And by that, I mean, they probably just laid the rocks down, maybe pushed the rocks over. We can see it in historic aerials, is why we know, from the 40s, 50s, into the 60s, and then whoop, it's gone. So anyways, just wanted to make a quick video, and by that I mean an 8-minute video of just our thought process when we're out here and you know, surveying a plot and or repairing a plot, and kind of just observing what's going on around us. You know, it's interesting to see how does that big cemetery with the, you know, the landowners relate to the big house here, the mansion house, whatever you want to call it. And, you know, something that we've struggled with and struggled to kind of come up with a answer is, okay, so how does the slave cemetery relate to, or a presupposed slave cemetery relate to the big cemetery and the house itself? So anyways, stay tuned for more.